Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve. I'm not Steve. I know that's very shocking to you, unless you've been watching for the last several weeks where Steve has been dropping hints about leaving the entire country behind and going on a vacation, which he did not pack me for, and I'm not bitter at all. But I'm Chelan. I'm Steve's daughter, and I'm going to be hosting today. His other daughter is in the background helping direct things because I don't do tech. So we have a wonderful show lined up for you today, Saturday, August the 23rd, 2025. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee or a mug of coffee or a goblet of coffee and join the conversation. Guys, join the coffee conversation because it is time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. We're off to a great start. I would like to say hello to people who are in the chat. I'm not sure if anybody's in the chat yet, so I'll just say hello to the world. Good morning. Obviously, oh, Carissa, you are unmuted, FYI.
Thanks. You know how
the director is here in the background. as a ghost. I don't have
Good
coffee
morning,
this
coffee
morning.
breaks. I'm interrupting because I can.
That's true. She can. I can't stop her. I don't know how to stop her on that. I don't have coffee this morning. I have broth because that sounded good. So welcome, one and all. Might just be one. I don't know. But welcome to Coffee Breaks. So I wanted to get into our sweet and savory, one of my favorite things, the charcuterie. The charcuterie, which we talk about some of the interesting and fun things happening this week, and or if there are any birthdays from our typical crew, our typical peeps, then we put them up there. So the only birthday I have on my list this week is my cousin Joshua Fort. Happy birthday, Josh. Excellent picture of him. Whoever selected that, so choice. Mwah. Chef's kiss. So his birthday's coming up. And if you have a special day this week, let us know in the chat. If you have a special day coming up, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, an anniversary. I can't think of any other as a special holiday that only you and your personal religion celebrate. I put them, email them to coffeebreaks@comcast.net, and we can put them up on our charcuterie board, the sweet and savory, the next week. So do that. You should do that. We love the engagement. So today I have a conversation with somebody I know fairly well enough that she did not give me an introduction paragraph, so I'm going to fake my way through it. Lisa Steele is the... No, she can't go on. She can't correct me. Lisa Steele. Well, first of all, you should know she's my boss. So this will be fun. She is the Assistant Provost of Experiential Learning at Pacific Northwest University of Health Sciences. And she earned a degree in something from not UCLA, from somewhere else. She'll tell us in a minute. Southern California, I don't know. And then she got her master's in public health. And now, like, just in the last 2 weeks, after I want to say a 7-year uphill climb, she has achieved her doctorate in business administration. So I'm going to have her come on and talk about that, her journey to that, because it is a wild story, which I think I know, but I have a feeling I'm going to find out parts that I just wasn't even aware of. And I thought you all would enjoy the story as well. So please welcome to the stage, Lisa Steele, Dr. Lisa Steele.
I didn't get to interrupt you. That was so
No! You can now.
You were pretty spot on. It is a master's from public health, and it was from University of Southern California, the rival of UCLA. Look at you.
I totally got that. Totally did that on purpose.
You did. Yep. I believe it. Mm-hmm. I believe it.
Well, so Lisa, welcome. I know you've been on the show many times. And pieces of your story have come up. We've talked about some of your leadership ideologies. The fact that you were at the Las Vegas shooting several years back, and you talked about that experience with us. We've talked about education and failing forward and all kinds of lovely things. But I really am hoping that this week we will talk about how you ended up here. How are you? What has been the journey? And then I will interrupt with some questions, but I think it's really interesting to go through. This was not your first attempt at getting a doctorate, and you made some choices that I know you don't regret either, that have led you here. So I'm just kind of open up the floor to you on where does the story start?
Where does the story start? Gosh. So we can start with my first attempt at a doctorate was back in 2005. So gosh, let's go back 20 years. At that time, I was working on my doctorate of osteopathy, which is kind of funny because we've come full circle and I've worked at DO programs for the last 15 years or so. But I had every intention of being a physician. And I will tell you, I thought I was going to be a pediatrician until I walked in the room with the pediatrician's office and I realized that there were parents on the other end of the kid. I said, I don't think I can do this. I am known not to be a helicopter parent. So having to navigate, and it's so funny because on the flip side, I started working with end of life and hospice and high acuity, crazy situations. And that was my world. It was amazing to help people through that transition of losing someone. And that I could do. So that stress, that was right up my alley. But the stress of a parent being in at times and realize I'm a mom, so I'm a grandma now, which is really crazy. Yeah, sometimes I forget that part. But it's understandable that we hit those moments of complete irrationality. Yeah. But navigating someone in their moments of complete irrationality was a world that I went, I don't think I want to do this the rest of my life. As I went through medical school, I also went through my first divorce and I had my first kiddo. And I went out on rotations and it was pretty formative moment when I sat and I had been on an all-night shift, worked at a county hospital, bringing in 20 plus patients. I mean, I was in my thrive moment and I loved every piece of it. And I got home and I committed to, after my 24-hour shifts, I didn't come home and go to bed. I spent time with my kid. And that kid is now the one that has his own kiddo. So it's kind of crazy to even think that. I got down with Kyle and I said, hey, buddy. And he looked at me and he just went, meh, and walked the other direction. And I went, I got to choose something different here. This is not going to work. He was about 5 at the time, to give context. I mean, he was little, but I was gone more than I was home. And that wasn't an acceptable piece in my world. I knew that I could throw myself into a work world in a way that I could dominate and succeed amazingly, but at what cost? And I wasn't going to be able to be the mom I wanted to be and be the physician that I wanted to be. So I voluntarily withdrew from the program. So that's the starting point of this whole journey.
So I would love for you to expound on what that choice means, because even when you told me, yes, I went through 3 years of school to become a doctor, and then I voluntarily withdrew. For years, even working at a school that had a DO, Doctor of Osteopathy program, I did not understand the ramifications of that. So what did that mean you were signing yourself up for?
So all of the student loans are already taken out. That doesn't go away. Trying to figure out, without having the anticipated salary of a physician, how are you going to pay off those student loans? That is a decision that you can't take lightly. The number of times in higher education is definitely a field in an area that the level of degree you have impacts how you are able to participate in certain conversations and engage at certain levels. What I found is that I was constantly having to prove my value and my worth. My degree didn't do that. The amount of time that I had spent in schooling didn't matter. At the end of the day, it was none of it's transferable. So that's really interesting when you get into certain programs. None of it was transferable. So when I started back, I actually left my DO program, started tutoring math. Gosh, if I would have told you I was never going to be a teacher. That's funny, isn't it? Knowing who I am now. I was never going to be a teacher, but I had tutored most of my life coming up through my years, even back in high school. And I started tutoring math at a continuation program, kids that had voluntarily withdrawn from school, kids that were forcibly withdrawn from school because of behavior or whatever the circumstances.
Okay.
Worked with a very unique niche of high school students. And I think that's when I found out that I loved working with students who didn't have a choice. I got the choice. I chose to walk. They didn't, right?
Ooh.
And so, yeah. And I think about that. That is carried through even to, so as much as I took the battle and the heat of not having the degree and is she really qualified and what can she really do? That's fine. Question me. I'm good with that. I can navigate that. But I found myself constantly pulled in to help students. And there were national exams, there were licensure exams where these kids were going and testing and failing multiple times. And first I started helping our internal students, and then I started helping a broader set of students. And then I was being asked to help students from other programs because I met them where they were. And I think that's the biggest piece is, you know, I've used the same tactic in meeting people I work with. I meet them where they're at. I don't expect them to step to the level I am. I remember being the person that made that choice. And so it's really put that integrity on my shoulders of, I'm not going to allow someone to take that choice from someone else. Let's get you through this, and then you can make the choice. And many of those kids, they were ready to quit, young adults, really. They were ready to quit medical school. And I told them, I said, it's not a choice to be taken lightly, and I'll be the first one to support you if that's the choice you make. But let's get past this hill, this mountain in front of you before you make that choice, because you can't see the path in front of you right now. And once they got over that hurdle, you know, all of them, I did not have one student I worked with not pass. After they got through that hurdle, it was like, I would never even imagine quitting. So, yeah.
Okay. I was kind of dealing with some tech things on the background. Did you mention how much you had already taken out in student loans when you decided to drop?
I didn't mention a dollar value, but if I think back to it, I probably had nearly $200,000 in debt when I chose to walk away. And I actually had worked in nonprofit organizations for years before I was even made aware that it was an option to do forgiveness. I knew that there were programs out there, but I didn't know that nonprofit organizations qualified. So it took me 10 years of paying my student loans to have them ultimately forgiven. And I stayed in the nonprofit sector with many people as I continued in my career, trying to pull me outside of that into the corporate structure. I refused to go outside of nonprofit because I had put so much energy and effort into getting those loans forgiven. So I was ultimately able to get them forgiven. But my goodness, stepping away and knowing you have about $200,000 sitting over your head, I didn't even own a home, and it felt like owning a home.
And then from there, what did you do after you had dropped out of school? What was your next path?
Yeah, so that's where I mentioned I started with tutoring. That's what started that. Then, funny situation. So here's a piece. Part of what has brought me to who I am is knowing that I made conscious choices, not allowing other people to be pushed into choices, right? That's a foundational principle. The other one is I believe everything happens for a reason. And boy, howdy, talk Las Vegas shooting. I can't always tell you what that reason is. And I can tell you sometimes if there is a reason, they really stink when you're the one living through the chaos. But I came back to my job. I had my daughter. I came back to my job after being on maternity leave, and I was let go pretty much instantly. Now, anybody probably realizes that's a hard no-go zone. That should not happen. It also should not happen when they're maintaining the person they hired after you in the same title that you have. However, I could have gone down that path, but I chose to go down the other road of, if I stayed in the job I was in, I was going to continue in the job I was in. And I think so many of us get stuck because we're in the job, because it pays the bills, because we don't see another option, because all of our energy and effort goes into the path we're on. So how can you even begin to look at a different path? So I believe that sometimes people make that path choice for you, and you might not like it, but if you step back and you're willing to at least ask the question, maybe I should be doing something different. So from there, I went and got my nursing license. I was able to work a part-time schedule and be home with my daughter part-time as well, a luxury I did not have with my son. And then I was gung-ho. I mean, that other end of the spectrum, and loving working with end-of-life care and terminal patients. Those are some of my most memorable moments in my career in healthcare. I was ready to go back and work towards a nurse practitioner license. If you would have asked me at the time, that's where I was going. And I saw a job at my old med school that I went, well, maybe I can go and do this. I really enjoyed the simulation center. Maybe this could be fun.
I have to ask because I know waitressing was in here somewhere. Where did waitressing fit into this timeline?
Waitressing, yeah, back when that was before medical school. So I was a single mom going through my bachelor's degree, and I was waitressing as well to keep everything afloat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so then you saw the job, so you the waitressing, you get through your bachelor's, then you're going for your doctorate, have Kyle, your son, and then drop out, and then you're tutoring and you apply for this job at the school where you had been attending as a student.
Yep, after getting my nursing license, which I tell you,
nursing license,
going from medical school to LPN or licensed vocational nurse program, that is a heck of a transition. I found myself teaching more than I was doing. But amazing experience, and a couple of my best friends that are still friends of mine now came from nursing school. So got this job offer, saw it, decided, you know what, let's go ahead and apply. And I was brought in for the interview. I was actually contacted for the first job I applied for. They let me know it was an internal hire plan, and then came back and said there would be another position open. So I applied to be an administrative assistant. Talk about a heck of a shift. And I went in and I interviewed, and my boss at the time let me know that if I gave her a year to 2 years, she would get me where I want to be. And I didn't even know where I wanted to be. So that was a very bold comment, but let's see what this pathway is. That's when I took on my master's in public health. Okay. But as I started that program and I started as the admin assistant, I very quickly was pulled in to be faculty and step in teaching on the back end unofficially. I eventually started getting stipends for that work that I was doing because it was outside of the scope of my job. And then ultimately a position was built for me that was a simulation, clinical skills and simulation educator, which I will tell you, do not add a T between the S and the I, and then post it up for when you're teaching a continuing education course, because I had someone very kindly do that for me. And me being who I am, I did unfortunately have to advise them we would not be discussing stimulation today, but we would be discussing simulation. So it's a mouthful of a title to start with, and unfortunately can be very easily switched into what you don't want to be. So it was quite fun, quite fun time frames.
And I didn't realize that the Masters of Public Health was in alignment with the timing of you becoming an admin at the simulation center at Western.
I think it was about a year afterwards, and you know a little bit more about my time frame at Western. So my job got very busy very quick, and next thing I knew, I was working 60 and 70-hour work weeks. Another one of those foundational elements of I have been the person that's been the workhorse that's been pushed down pathways, and so as a supervisor and as a leader, my frame is do not allow your team to be taken advantage of, and help them figure out how to find those work-life boundaries. Some people will just continue using you, and unfortunately there is a workforce full of folks that do not always operate at the top of where their scope is, whether they are incapable, whether they are not coached to. There's a variety of reasons, whether they've been Peter's principled and they're elevated to their highest level of incompetence. There's a variety of reasons. But you cannot add more load to a broad set of shoulders because somebody else is not carrying their weight and expect people to withstand. It's just not a good place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought of a question I had before we move into your foray to become a doctor finally. When you were in school, I know you said when you saw this position come up and decide to apply for it, that, I enjoyed simulation. I find that some students really appreciate simulation and others really struggle with it because it's all about you being in your place of discomfort and trying things that you're not expert at yet. What was your experience in simulation that it stood out to you as an area of interest for a career path?
So, to be fair, I excelled in sim. I did really well in sim.
Okay.
And I attribute part of that not necessarily to I did all the right things in the evaluation of the patient. My capacity to connect to people was very strong. And I think that really showcased that. I had SPs, simulated patients, who I was working with as a student that kept asking me, when are you going to be back here as our provider? And so it was just really powerful moments like that. When I came back in as an employee, many of them remembered me as a student. So it wasn't, I don't believe it was one-sided where it was just really a positive experience on my end. It really gave you that affirmation that you were on the right path, because you knew that you were not just excelling and succeeding at something, but you were also the person on the other end was enjoying that as much as you were. And that's not a piece that I think most people get to experience. I think that's the difference between having a career and having a job. I wasn't looking for a job. I don't want my life to be about working. I want to work to be able to have a life. And if you're in the right position, that job doesn't feel like just a job. I remember going there every day. I'm not a memorization person. I'm not let's just read all these things and memorize it. I have to understand the how and the why. So that hands-on training was probably another big piece for me, where putting my skills in action was huge. And it made things make sense. There was a reason behind everything I was trying to cram into my brain, because I will say medical school is legitimately drinking from a fire hose, and maybe worse. So being able to learn and apply those skills was really powerful for me.
Okay. So you came in as an admin, and then what was the span of time of how your role changed within that simulation center?
Rapid. So I was stepping in and covering teaching responsibilities probably within 6 months. I had stepped in to assist with developing trainings for SPs just informally within that same time frame. My new position, I started in March, and my new position, we're on annual cycles, very similar, so July to June. My new position started the 2nd July I was there, so just over a year, and I was in my new position. From there, I went from being in my new position. I had acquired an adjunct faculty appointment somewhere along there. And then I took on the assistant director position probably about 3 years in, and I took on the director position in 4. So yeah, rapid progression very quickly up a line. It was pretty crazy.
And at what point did you go, I want to strive for this. This is what I want.
Never.
Because at first your boss is going, I'll get you where you want to go. You're going, I don't know where I want to go.
I don't know where I want to be. So how are you going to get me there? Never. And the funny part of that is, I think that defines a leader. Someone who is striving for a position is often not looking the right direction. And even if you were at one time, many people on this call may be able to reflect the moment you lost sight of the true purpose. And it's because we're trying to climb. It's because we're trying to achieve something. It's because we're aiming for something. My aim was never on climbing a ladder. My aim was never on a position. My aim was on those students. My aim was preventing them from having to go through what I went through. How do I impact their education? How do I make their experience better? How do I ultimately impact? Because the hardest part I ever stepped away from was patient care. And that's the real driver, even beyond the student. The student is the vehicle to the patient care. How do you work with those students, with that curriculum, to truly impact patient care at that level? And I think that's what really drove me up the path, because are there any positions that I've taken on that I go, yes, this is the position I want? Probably not. I don't know that for certain. I'd have to really think hard, but I don't think so. Every step I made up the administrative ladder was a step away from direct care. Every step away from direct care was harder for me. But I knew that I had a capacity to break down pretty significant walls and historical trajectories that allowed me to have a greater impact, even though it wasn't a direct impact.
Okay. So now you ended up, how did you end up in Yakima? We'll do that real quick.
I met you randomly at a conference in the midst of that.
Of like 3,000 people somehow. And by then, though,
How
to be
funny.
fair, by then you had already applied for the job. And so you came up to say, hey, you mentioned that you're in a rural area of simulation that last class. Where are you? And I went, Yakima, Washington. And you got this look on your face. Okay.
I just
said,
applied there.
I just applied there for the executive director position. So at what point did you go, okay, I'm going to go for my doctorate?
Well, so how did I get to Yakima? Kind of led to the doctorate. So I had quit my doctorate because I said I wasn't going to allow my work to overbear on my family. And I had a second child in there. I had a second marriage as well. My second marriage was probably rougher than my first, and I'll leave it at that. But I stayed because I didn't want my kids to not have their dad. And my daughter absolutely adores him. Actually is in California with him and has such a better relationship now than what we had when we were together. So I'm very pleased that is working out the way that it is. When I realized that I couldn't continue sustaining the workload that I had, I was working 60 to 70 hours a week easily. When I stepped into the director position, I didn't get out of my other position. We couldn't find somebody to fill it. This is why you don't build positions for people. You build positions for units. So I was really struggling a lot. I transparently went to leadership, let them know, something needed to give. And that from a financial standpoint, I needed to have a compensation that matched the level of work I was doing. And that's a conversation many people have a hard time taking forward. And it wasn't ever my driver, but I realized that where I was and what I was doing, and I was living in California, it wasn't sustainable. So I needed to find a sustainable answer. I gave them the time to try to find a different path. And unfortunately, we didn't find a path forward. And when I came back after the holiday, I asked again and inquired and was told it might be an option, but not until July. And I let them know at that point that I couldn't guarantee that I was going to withstand continuous load if I couldn't find another solution with no guarantee in July. And I had already seen the Yakima position. I had seen the position I'm in now. Well, position I was in. And I had considered applying, but I had kids in high school and middle school and, well, elementary even.
Yeah.
Could I really move them? Is this really the right time? There's never a right time. Just, if everybody can come to terms with that, nobody is ever ready. Nobody is ever going to have the right time. It's this figment in our brain to make us more comfortable, and it's never going to be true. So I went ahead and applied, decided I'd throw my application in January. And I had a call, pretty instantly before I saw you in January. So my application went in January. I met you in January. I interviewed in February, and I was there in March. So very quick trajectory. I knew that at some point I needed to go back and get my doctorate, partly for the frame of being able to move forward in the career that I was in wasn't going to happen without having that terminal degree. That became very apparent when I got up here.
Within medical education?
Within higher education as a whole. So I decided, if I'm really going to walk down this path again, and I started my doctorate probably about a month after I started my position in Yakima. So
I didn't realize
2017. Yep. And I finished all of my coursework. Here's the thing. I knew that I had a year of watching and trying to help you guys find your feet before I could really dig my fingers in deep, right? So I wanted to make the most of that year. So within 14 to 16 months, I had all my doctoral coursework done, except my dissertation. And so I started, that is the beast, I tell you. I started my dissertation work trying to find a topic probably late 2018, early 2019. Finally got through my first course, got my dissertation proposal in, which is the first step of getting permission to even do the research and continue through the courses. And I had to change topics after I had an approved draft, which made it even more complex. One of our faculty left, and she was my lead on my project. And so I had to change topics midstream. Resubmitted, got my topic back in place, got my DP approved, which is that dissertational proposal, right towards 2020. And I don't think I have to elaborate what happened at that point.
All I will say on that front is I know a lot of things slowed down. Our simulation center, it's sped up a bit because nobody had in-person experiences. We were the stand-in for every hands-on experience that was shut down at that time. So we got a little busy.
Yeah, keeping everybody on track for graduation and trying to make sure it's not, so I'm never a check-the-box person. Great, we kept their rotations on track. I don't care. Did we give them a quality experience to be able to truly provide the patient care they needed to provide? And so those were the conversations at that time. Our work weeks definitely got out of control at that time. And I remember telling the team that it would get better and that I knew we were pushing harder than we necessarily should be, but we were the only ones that could salvage this right now. And I would say within about 8 months to a year, we were pretty much leveled back out. But again, it's stepping away from anything for that long is really challenging. So I had gotten through my research and then I stepped away from it. And then I, of course, chose to do qualitative research, which is a lot of analysis. And every time I stepped away, I was that much further from everything that I had done. And it was like, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop the entire time there. And then I went through healthcare stuff. And I was out to some degree for probably 8 months to a year.
You had a surgery.
I had surgery. I had a thyroid surgery. So that further delayed it. I took some leave of absences during that time. And then I came back to it. And one of the things that was probably the hardest about coming back to it post-surgery, my brain could not hold to the knowledge that I used to. I mean, Chelan knows probably more than many, my capacity to pull back to a piece of information from 5 years ago or whenever it happened to be and use that as, well, hold on, here's what we discussed and here's what we agreed upon. And therefore, if you're asking us for a shift, we're more than happy to accommodate. And let's recognize that we aren't changing things on you, you're changing things on us. That's probably the greatest skill set I have in my entire career. If I leaned on one and it was gone. I mean, talk about a challenge, right? The one thing you depended on was taken away. And so now I'm trying to get back to research from years prior, 3 years prior. In the midst of this, we built a simulation center. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Whole new simulation center. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we revamped our organizational structure for the second time sometime in there. My life has never given me the grace of pause, and that's okay. But I will tell you, I've learned pausing doesn't always help you, because I had paused that doctoral degree now a couple times, and both times it was not an easy ask to get back to it. So, but ultimately, we got into this last course and I buckled down, and then we had more changes. I buckled down hard at that point and said, I have to get this done. And in the midst of that, I had a grandbaby born a month early. We had a key individual from our team decide to quit. And we were getting ready to kick off a new academic year. And it's probably one of the few times I've ever truly guarded my time to a larger degree. And even then, not to a detriment to anyone around me. But there were times I was asked to complete a project in a tight turnaround where normally I would buckle down, get it done, not a problem. And I said, I can't. And learning to be able to say that is really important. Equally, saving your moments for saying that to the ones that really matter makes it matter more. And so I was supported in those moments where I said, I can't. And even in our restructure, had assistance from our HR side in putting some of the paperwork together that they needed in a timely fashion, that I was in redraft mode and final draft mode. My class ended on July 27th, and I was literally waiting for the back and forth approval timeframes of 1 to 2 weeks. And so finally, I did get it approved, and I got an extension to defend officially on the 12th of August. And now we're done. And now people say, now what? I'm like, I don't know. I can say probably one of the important pieces of when I decided I wanted to go back for my doctorate, how do you decide what to do? And everything logic in my position and in my trajectory for my career path said, stay with an educational degree. Do an educational degree. You can still do it with organizational leadership, which is where my degree is. But I didn't want to be locked in education forever. So I chose business, and I don't regret it. The amount that I have learned in my research process and how to invoke change, and equally, I've done change my entire life. So it's kind of like putting a seal of approval on a skill set.
This woman really knows what she's talking about. She has a degree to prove it. Yes, her entire life, and now the degree to say so. Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels.
Well, that feels very, not anticlimactic, but it's like I could talk further with you about this and about, I've been able to, for hours, I've been able to be next to Lisa as she's been climbing through this and gotten to see, hey, I'm defending next week. Hey, the defense is today. Hey, it went well. They said I passed, like all of those things. And the after effects of it. We are out of time. I always run too late when I host these days because I could just talk to our guests forever. But for somebody who's thinking about making a major change in their life, going for something that feels unattainable or feels like the ship has sailed, what would you tell them?
The only reason it's not there is if you don't step. You just have to make the choice.
And now we've gotten you crying, so how about that? That's a rarity.
That's on occasion. Legitimately, my best advice is you are your biggest barrier. What we do in our own mind is far more traumatic than anybody can do to you. But I mean, I sit and I think about all the choices that I could have paused, right? And justified. And what's scarier than change? Honestly, ask yourself what happens if nothing changes and you stay exactly where you're at.
Yeah, stagnancy terrifies me.
And I'm a gypsy soul, so change for me is easy. But I tell you, when you really look at those moments, and they're hard moments, they're hard choices, it's so tempting to lean to comfort.
Yeah.
So tempting to lean to comfort. And I will tell you 90% of the time it's the wrong answer, because comfort isn't where we find that next step or that challenge, or that I would have never made it as far in my career if I would have leaned to comfort.
Lisa Steele, Dr. Lisa Steele, you are a rock star. And I feel like your story needs to become a book and a movie and maybe a country song. Thank you so much for joining today and just sharing your journey with us. I'm sure we will have you back on the show to talk about more interesting things. The other thing I was tempted to do with Lisa today was to use AI to write a children's book with her live. That could come another time. We've talked about all the many dreams. She would love to write children's books about leadership and gets children started early on learning how to be leaders in their own lives and for the people around them. So that could be a future thing. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on another Coffee Breaks very soon.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Bye. That was Lisa Steele, Dr. Lisa Steele. I love saying that. She is not a big fan of, like, now that I've earned it, you have to call me doctor, but I really enjoy saying Dr. Lisa Steele after all of the effort and that much of a push and the path that she's been on. So that was Dr. Lisa Steele joining us from Yakima, Washington. And as we're wrapping up the day, and I'm actually it should wrap up right now, but I'm really close to staying on time, which I usually am not. So I'm going to call this a win. Let's see. Oh, Carissa told me how I was supposed to do this next part. And of course, now I can't find it. The coming up slide, which I might have access to. Maybe add to stage. No. Coming up, add to stage. Look at that. Do that. Okay. So coming up next week on August 30th, we're going to have more family on here. So we've got our director dog, Carissa Wheelock, and her husband, Jason Wheelock, talking about his experience with their small, beautiful town of Vernonia and his role stepping in to preserve their parks and rec and all the things that a town needs. And we always see people, they're looking for volunteers, they're looking for help. And I really don't know what all goes into that. It's a little intimidating to go, oh, I'm going to now step in to take care of my city. So Jason's going to talk to us about that. So please tune in for that, because I think it'll be another great conversation where you learn a lot. And then on September 6th, AIAIO is the name of our episode. It's going to be Carissa Wheelock and whoever that is, Chelan Shepherd again, and maybe another guest. We will see, talking about AI. the positives, the potential negatives, the potential uprising. So I think that will also be an interesting conversation. So I hope you will join us for that. And if you know anybody who does book clubs, Steve of Coffee Breaks with Steve is looking for book club participants for an episode about book clubs, joining a book club, starting a book club, what that experience is like. I've not been in a book club, so I cannot be on that one. But he is looking for the people in your life who you know can speak on this subject. So please email cbwsteve@comcast.net and let him know if you or someone you know could be a good guest for that. If there are any other topics you would like to discuss, guests you would like to see, stories you want to tell, email cbwsteve, if we're seeing a pattern here, at comcast.net to share your ideas. This happens every Saturday, and we're on YouTube. There's merch to be had, lovely color changing mugs, and there's been over 100 individual special guests. And I'm not going to get the number right if I try and say how many guest conversations like the one we had today we've had on Coffee Breaks with Steve over the span of four or 5 years now. But it's been a lot, and there's a lot of love and effort that gets put into it. So really it is you who helped to make this happen. And we love your engagement. We love your ideas and your thoughts because you always bring something interesting that we hadn't thought about. So this is not just a family endeavor, or if it is, you are part of our family. So please join with us in making Coffee Breaks with Steve. Lastly, I will say, really appreciate everybody who tuned in today. Of course, appreciate Lisa Steele and Carissa in the background, helping to make things run as smoothly as a non-tech person could hope for them to run. And as always, I will say, find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you, and we'll see you soon on Coffee Breaks with Steve.